Hi, we're here together now with, I forgot your name, Ron?
With Ray
Yeah.
Savage.
Okay, one more time. Hi, today I'm making an interview. We're together with Ray from England. And we'll just go in medias res and let's see what he has to say. We're here in a conference for the German section of, well, for the English-speaking people, it would be probably easier to say it's the German section of the Steven Greer ET Kontakt group. We are different, but here we're in Deggendorf right now. And I'm quite happy to meet you. It was quite interesting to listen to all the people. But you have something to say. I would say it's interesting for all the other people also. Maybe we go into your story, you tell who you are and what you have to say.
Oh, yes, it's really good to be here. And you know, I didn't catch your name. Was it Roland or Oland?
Roland.
Oh, Roland.
Yeah,
Roland, yeah, it's good to meet you, Roland. And I know there's a lot of synchronicity in many of the things that we've talked about, and particularly with the group here. And it's been an incredibly beneficial experience to me to make the decision to come here at very short notice. Yeah, my background, my working background's in two halves in actual fact. As quite a young man I joined the police cadets and then I had an almost 20-year career with Sussex Police. But part of that was actually on the regional crime squad and also as a counter-terrorist officer. With most policing, you'd start sort of through beat work, criminal intelligence, and then perhaps slightly specialised. And my specialism came through the training department and then into detective work, which took me to the crime squad, intelligence, and then anti counter-terrorism.
That's quite a career. How did you?
Yeah, well, that's not unusual, particularly if you're looking at being promoted through the ranks. Yeah. I joined in the 60s when the police really was quite primitive, and some people have found it quite hard on this course to imagine a police force that didn't actually have personal radio communication. The communications when I started were actually from telephone boxes to telephone boxes, being called by the sergeant who was in charge. So we didn't even carry a personal radio. So to some people, I probably started policing in the dark ages. But in those ages, and this is very interesting, in those ages, or in that time, to me the police force was a service, and we've actually been talking. We've been talking about service to others here as part of the way forward from the paradigm of power over others. But what I saw was the police going from service to other very strongly to force. Yeah, in fact, the name of the police area that I first started in was East Sussex Constabulary, and constabulary really is a word for service.
That service would be a wonderful thing. We all would need that.
Yeah, well, we did have that. In the 60s, it was a service-orientated group.
And how did that change?
Well, it changed slowly, and the name was changed to police force. And if you think of the difference, service and force...
Yeah, it's not a service anymore.
It definitely is not a service anymore. And I actually saw the inflection of what was going on change. More centralisation happened, more and more centralisation. Yeah. Amalgamation of different areas into one larger force that was more and more controlled from the pyramid structure rather than a devolved community structure.
You have any idea who is on the top of this pyramid? Did you have any insights?
Well, when I was within the force, no, but now very strong insights. Yeah, you know, I would say the 13 banking families, the names, the Kabul, and whatever. But that's where the pyramid would ultimately go to.
Yeah, almost the same.
So, but just focusing a little, and I think this is where you want to go, just focusing on the terrorist sort of aspect.
The difference between service and this force.
And force. To my feeling now, standing back and looking with the experience that I've had, the force was very much to induce fear.
That's the point.
Into people. Mm-hmm. And the actual threat, the actual terrorist threat was minuscule in comparison. And I saw recently a chart of how people die, if you like, what causes death. Mm-hmm. and the terrorist threat was way, way down that chart. Yet if you look at our corporate media, and I don't call it even mainstream media because I don't think now it is mainstream, because so many people are getting their
more and more people are
information from other sources on the internet, which has been one of the best things, of course, that we could ever have.
What we are doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. What I really seen with the corporately controlled media is this proliferation of fear, and the terrorist threat is a fear that's induced that actually is not realistic in view of all of the other reasons that people in actual fact die.
So you personally, being inside, see a big gap between the real things happening and the fear created, which is much bigger. Is that true?
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, what the people need to know, that there's the real thing is. This was a very important point. Do you know anything about made-up terrorist attacks?
Really, from a first-hand point of view, no. But I think and I've done this research. Well, if anybody does any research on the internet, it's very easy to see. I know there are huge anomalies over 9/11. I took part in a film called Incontrovertible that was put together by a former BBC documentary maker, Tony Rook. And that's an extraordinary film that shows the number of anomalies and the number of people who are questioning the official narrative. Right from the first responders to the police on duty then, to the engineers who are very familiar with construction of those sorts of buildings, to the metallurgists, to the pilots, all who are questioning. And of course, in our corporate controlled media, we have no space to even look or question that. So anybody that really wants to look at that. And then onwardly to 7/7, which occurred in the UK. You know, I know police officers that were there first on the scene on 7/7, and as with 9/11, there were multiple exercises being conducted on that day that almost created a chaos around how that day happened. But I know police officers that completely contradict the official narrative of that day, just as with 9/11.
So there on that day, not really.
Well, there was a bomb ostensibly delivered by a rucksack into the tube, but I know there are huge question marks around that and around the whole process of that. This, I don't think, is the time to go into that. And
we don't have so much time.
There's good people that have done that. Nick Colostrum, who wrote a book called 7/7. I think he wrote the definitive study on that. He's a professor, and he wrote the definitive study on that.
We'll see
and it's well worth looking at that. Yeah, and just like Dr. Julie Wood wrote the definitive, as far as I'm concerned, investigation into 9/11. But there's many other people, and Incontrovertible is a good film on that.
In 7/7, 9/11, we have a lot of these stories. Okay, since we really have, unfortunately, not so much time, I would like to make a second subject to open a door, because it said something very interesting about natural behavior of humans according to the moon.
Yeah, and I think
you could talk a little bit about
and
this.
maybe we can add in the sun as well. I think
as you like,
what medically we don't seem to look at, our current medical paradigm doesn't look at the influence of our body cells from the electromagnetic perspective. Okay. And the planets definitely have a huge impact. The positioning of the planets have a huge impact on the electromagnetic astrology. Yeah, it's an older science than the science of our current medicine.
Of course.
But my experience in the police was to actually see at certain aspects of the moon cycle how that impacted crime and the number of things that a police officer would have to deal with. We wouldn't even need to look outside to see what the moon cycle is. We would know by the type of calls that we were getting. And the word lunatics comes from people who perhaps are overly influenced by that spectrum of electromagnetism that the moon can have.
So that means any time, is it full moon or new moon?
Do you know, I've got a feeling it's full moon, but I need to stand to be corrected. But I know it's part of the moon cycle. We always knew that we were going to have a hiatus of things happening, and crime can go up.
So there's certain periods of the moon cycle when you can definitely see there's a bigger, more events, more criminal events are happening. Is that true?
Yeah. Okay. And it also applies, having studied with heart math, it also applies to the sun's solar cycles as well.
Yes.
And I think that's very pertinent to where we are now, because we're coming into a heightened period of sun activity.
Yeah, the next month will be.
Yeah, and I think we've just gone through a very heightened period, which some might say has had impacts on the planet to violence and violent outbreaks, but also periods of heightened research that can manifest in some major advances. And of course it's the advances that are not given corporate media space, it's more the fear of the problems that are given the space. But there have been some great advances with humanity, with what's the word I want? With things being found, things being investigated. No, there's another word, but I haven't got that.
Anyway, this goes out to any psychologist or anything who has to deal with criminal minds, to look to the reasons, not only in family and in history, but also in astrology. We don't do that at all.
And sun cycle.
And sun cycle. And also this. I think this is really value information because it comes from you in first hand, and it's always good to have somebody who has his own experience. Since we shall go back to the meeting, I thank you very much. If you want to add something, you're free to say whatever you want now. Because I think we covered the two things I thought were well.
I would just really like to say, from my experience, I think that we're in a time of heightened sun spots or heightened sun solar activity, and it's a great time for us to start creating the future that we want.
That's a good word. So keep on to our dreams and make our visions real. That's the future, if we need visions.
And I see the group that I've been with here this week, not least of all you, Roland, as great visionaries. I've never sat in a room with so many visionaries that are here to co-create a wholly different humanity.
I think so too. It's a good group, good people here.
Yeah. Thank you.
So well, I thank you very much. That was very kind of you to take your time, because our time is limited here. Therefore we also have to go back. God bless you.